and welcome to tonight's ESU Happy Hour. Today's presentation is How I Stole a Monet from My Client, a fun tale and focus on the ins and outs of the fine art world with Debra Rhodes Smith. My name is Brian Burns, and I'm a member of the Happy Hour Committee and president of the Sandhills branch of the ESU here in Pinehurst, North Carolina, who is hosting today's Happy Hour. Ideas for our happy hour lectures come from our ESU members and viewers like you. At the end of this program, you will receive a survey in your email. We encourage you to share your feedback on tonight's lecture and welcome ideas for upcoming happy hours. Some other notes about tonight's presentation: there will be a question and answer session at the end. You may submit your questions using the dedicated Q&A and chat modules at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You may submit your questions at any point during the presentation. However, do note that questions will be answered in the order that they are received. The Sandhills branch is a very active branch here in North Carolina. We participate in all the ESU educational programs to include middle school debate along with our local Rotary Club, the annual Shakespeare competition, T-Lab, and have a vibrant member social program. Tonight's speaker is a published author and globally recognized fine arts appraiser and historian. After starting her career working with the international print publisher HMK Fine Arts in New York City, she started her own fine arts advisory company where she compiled collections for numerous corporations and luxury hotels worldwide. She became an accredited fine arts appraiser through the Appraisers Association of America, specializing in fine and decorative arts, paintings, works on paper, and prints. Debra has delivered lectures and presentations to a number of universities and colleges on alternative careers in fine art, art and antique appraising, and is the author of Tales of Art Beyond the Frame. And I'm proud to say that she is a recent member to our branch here in Pinehurst, and I like to say that she's a neighbor of mine. Now, grab tonight's suggested Russell Reserve Bourbon Manhattan or your favorite happy hour cocktail, and welcome Debra Rhodes Smith.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank the English Speaking Union and Brian for inviting me to speak with your esteemed members. And cheers to all. I don't have a bourbon Manhattan today. Let me now share my screen because it's now the now it's the story of the evening. So some of the points that I've just gone through will be understood better when I give this story. So once upon a time, before the internet, when appraisal research for comps and catalog raisonné existence required utilizing the art research room at the New York Public Library, one needed credentials to be admitted. There's a slot in a wooden door, and it opens like a speakeasy, and you had to pass your card to show that you were qualified to be admitted, and that was a whole application you had to previously go through. So we're coming out of a recession during which the art market suffered. And this was actually November 1993, but it could have been this past November because previous to this November, consigners were not putting up as many works of across the board, various categories that they had been in previous years. And buyers were a little standoffish as well, because they, number one, there was inflation, and number two, they were curious about the result of the election. But back to 1993, we wanted to see how collectors would open their wallets and bank vaults again. So an existing corporate client of mine, a captain of industry, and a major player in Washington, D.C., as he was also his party's national chairman, decided it was time to invest in a major impressionist artist painting. He asked me to represent him at Sotheby's, but he did not know what what he wanted. He wanted me to select what it was. So this is the auction. This is the catalog cover for that auction. And he wanted me to make suggestions. Well, I knew his corporate taste. I had done his corporate headquarters and various satellite offices and some items for his personal collection, but nothing of this caliber. So there were 2 preview days, and he would fly up for the second preview day to see what it was that I selected. So that left the first preview day for me to go and scour the inventory in the sales room at Sotheby's and proceed. So how would I know where to start? Well, I have been very lucky in my career. I have a sixth sense, and I wear this, I put on my jacket of what would I buy if I had millions of dollars? And I try to put myself in the shoes of the client. So there were several eliminated after speaking with the Sotheby's department head regarding condition, details not indicated in the catalog. And there was a fabulous Matisse cutout, which is what you're looking at. But this image was not the impressionistic piece that he wanted. And actually, it's not, it's past Impressionism in all technicality. And it was very large, as you can see by the dimensions on the bottom of your screen. And by the way, it sold for $12.5 million. Another option was the Raoul Dufy. That was a bullfighting scene, not exactly a major investment, and it had an estimate of $180,000 to $250,000, but there was something about it that I liked. And then there was also a Pizarro, and I thought that, that could be interesting. 1.2 million to 1.6 million was the estimate for that. And that also sold, and it sold for $2 million. Well, there were a few others, including 2 Monets. And one intrigued me, but I made a note of them all. There was also a pointillist, which I really liked, but I'm glad I dismissed it. As it turns out, it was withdrawn from the sale, and that would have been a monkey wrench in everything. So after my inquiries, I was back off to the speakeasy room and to see the comparables, how they fared against estimates that that the auction house put on these paintings that I had pre-selected. And I was performing a market analysis so that my client could get a sense of what the threshold would be for bidding in terms of a ceiling. I don't believe that a dog chasing a car is a good investment strategy. So mission accomplished. I did all my research, and I needed to make one more stop on my way home, and that entailed buying a new suit for the next day's meeting with my client. Well, my new suit gave me all the confidence that I needed, and the meeting with my client went well. We strode through the installation of consignments, and we reviewed most of the 6 suggestions. We stopped at a larger Monet, and I brought to his attention that if you stood 15 feet back, it was a landscape. but when you stood closer, you could study the methodology of the way that Monet used in layering the paint, and it became an abstract deconstruction. Now, ironically, as an aside, Patrick Bringley, in All the Beauty in the World, speaks of a similar analogy if you were in his role as museum guard experienced, and that was 13 years after I wrote about that in my book. So common thread, but I digress. So my client flew back to DC and said he would call me the next morning with his decision. And by the way, the Monet is also owned by was the same owner as the Pizarro. Time for. Well, as promised, the next morning I was given instructions to bid only on one painting, The Flood of the Seine at Vithiel, excuse me. And it was the last, this series was just before the Haystack series. So if you're curious about where this was in the scheme of things, and he was giving me power of attorney. And the paperwork would be dealt with Sotheby's and his executive assistant. So he had an account in good standing, and so money was not an issue. And I could bid up to $2.5 million. And as a point of fact, $2.5 million in 1993 would be equivalent to $5.4 million today. So between the call, which I received in my home, I decided instead of going to my office in the National Arts Club in Gramercy Park, I would spend the time pulling a Lee Marvin in Cat Ballou, preparing for battle before I would depart for the auction. Lee Marvin never called it a spa day. The auction was at 7 on York Avenue and 72nd Street. An intersection of 6 lanes to 6 lanes. I had reverse commute from Summit, New Jersey, and leaving at 5 was plenty of time for a 20-mile drive in my Cobalt Beamer, my black designer dress, pearls, and 4-inch heels. Everything was smooth sailing until I got to Canal and Varick Street. With a snap of a finger, like a light switch going off, everything was instant gridlock. After a while, I became insanely nervous. I knew every shortcut in New York City, but couldn't move my tires. I couldn't get on the sidewalk and drive and cheat or whatever. But technically, I could phone in the bidding, but that wasn't what he was paying me for. So, for yet another movie reference, when James Gardner needed to get to the hospital to deliver a baby in The Thrill of It All, he had the aid of a cop on a horse. And at that moment in my car, I thought I needed that horse. Well, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, and an hour had gone by, traffic started moving. There was a parking garage diagonally across the intersection from Sotheby's, and since my painting was lot 7, I did not want to be late. So standing at the concierge desk to get my paddle, they asked me for my driver's license. Well, I went through my purse and my attaché, and my wallet was missing. Oh, of course, I left it on the car seat. And it was dark, but I used it to pay the toll, and I forgot to put it in my purse. So totally flustered, I ran diagonally across the intersection in 4-inch heels, taking life and limb in harm's way. And I explained to the attendant that I left something in the glove box, in the lock box, and needed to be taken to my car because no way did I want to say that I left my wallet on the passenger seat and could he get it for me? So mission accomplished, and back across the diagonal, I excused myself as only a New Yorker would through multiple people. Excuse me, I'm lot number 7. Excuse me, I'm lot number 7. And I ran upstairs to enter the vast the sales room. And I can see as an overview that there were no seats, all taken by prominent art dealers world over. And the walls were lined jam-packed with people. And I started inching around the perimeter of the room, and I kept looking at the podium where John Marin, who was going to run the auction, and I kept walking around, trying to walk around, and I see this one space in the back of the room. And like I could see, I said, okay, I want a laser beam between myself and the podium. So I get my composure, and then it's lot number 7. Well, one thing about this painting was that it was a virgin and it had not been in the market multiple times. Sometimes you see that at auction where something is turned around many, many times. So this was not. The estimate was 1.75 to 2.25, and the bidding started around 750,000. And I held back. I just listened. But I kept shooting intensive stares up front. And then I finally raised my paddle at 900,000. And it was immediately acknowledged as a bid from the back wall. And I could hear these murmurs that were rolling from the front, but I dismissed them. Well, the volleying in the room went a few times, and I jumped in every once in a while. And since the bidding was slowing, and each time I bid, the same recurring situation from the back wall, and then these murmurs. Well, it dawned on me, I'm going to get this painting, because I had up to 2.5, and based on the cadence, it was never going to get that far. So when I acknowledged 1.5 and raised my paddle, in a knee-jerk reaction, sold to the bidder at the back wall, and all pandemonium broke out. 3 things happened. 1, I saw the room go gray, and I went from feeling all powerful and mighty to I thought I was going to faint. Someone leapt over the chairs and offered me a seat that appeared out of nowhere. It was the department specialist I spoke to the other day. She said, "You stole that painting." She said she was so glad it was me. I asked the best questions. 2, the front of the room was a cacophony of screaming. The back of the room was all around me, was all in applause. 3, while seated and trying to pay attention to other lots and jotting down hammer results, but it was all a blur, I asked my neighbor next to me, why was there such excitement in the front? And she explained they probably thought there was something wrong with the painting that was not disclosed in the catalog, and that the auction house, had to take chandelier bids up just short of the reserve. Nobody important would ever be at the back of the room. On the phone, maybe, but in the balcony, but not in the back of the room. So for those that are unaware, a chandelier bid is when you have something up at auction, and there is a reserve, which is usually 10 to no more than 15% below the low estimate. And you can put a reserve so that if the bidding is very soft that day, if there's not much interest in the piece, you haven't given it away on the cheap. So an auction house could see a couple of bids. They could sense that things are getting slow. They are the only ones that know what the reserve is. They and the owner of the piece. And to encourage more bidding, they could take a bid from a chandelier or a back wall. So as long as it doesn't reach the reserve, no harm, no foul. Well, anyway, so that event is over, and I have no idea how I got home. The car was on autopilot. I had driven across town. I had gone through the Lincoln Tunnel. I'm on this ramp in Secaucus, New Jersey, and all of a sudden I realized I have no idea how I got there. The tires never touched the ground. So the next day, I called the client with the news, and the first thing he asked after I told him about the price that we got the painting for, he said, "What's wrong with the painting?" Well, I told him the story. So that was not the only thing that happened that morning. I had already moved the chairs on the Titanic. Carol Vogel wrote in the New York Times that the painting was sold to a phone bidder. Well, I called her office and left a voicemail. And I said I could never believe anything that she wrote going forward because everyone there knew very much that I was in the building. So later that morning, I was back at Sotheby's for the next day's auction and more bidding for a minor painting that the client had requested. And the department head saw me and she rushed over, and I could see that she was holding something. And she presented me with a book written by John Mayer. And he was soon to be retiring. Well, he had autographed it and inscribed it. And she said he was really very impressed on how you got that painting. So I got it wholesale. I got it for, almost half price. So she also gave me her card and said, anytime I came to auction, to call her because I would always be given a seat. But as Brian Burns said so aptly, if I had not gotten stuck in traffic, I may never have stole that painting because I'd be in a chair somewhere in the middle of the arena. So this is yet another episode of snippets of great experiences as an art advisor and appraiser, and why what I do is an addiction waiting for the next great assignment. And if you enjoyed this story, please read my self-published ebook, Tales of Art Beyond the Frame, and it's available on all 3 platforms at a very reasonable price. So thank you all for your hospitality. And Brian, I think you're in charge of any questions, and I will stop sharing my screen. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks so much, Deborah. I really appreciate that. And I loved hearing it the first time, and I loved hearing it again. Having a daughter who currently lives in New York City, I can imagine traffic and running across intersections. So we do have a few questions for you. If you have a painting that appears to be original, not a print, by a collected artist, but can't afford an appraisal, how do you find out if it is a true painting?
Well, you actually are responsible for having it authenticated. So, number one, One thing I tell people to do when they think they have an original, let's say it's behind glass, but it looks like an original, is hold a magnifying glass up to it. And if you see the tiniest little dots throughout the whole piece, and it could be in different colors, certainly if it's a color piece, and that would indicate that it's an offset lithograph. But if it has brush strokes and you think it's an original oil, I would Google the image and make sure that it's not a giclée on canvas with clear gel brush strokes. So, if you think you have a Monet, you probably don't. It could be a giclée print on canvas made to look like it's an original. But hopefully you could disregard all of that and you should get an appraisal. And an appraiser, like for myself, if somebody asks me to look at something, I'll be able to look at it with a loop or from my experience and say, you know what, I'm not going to charge you for an appraisal because this is not appraisable. So hope
Perfect.
that answered that question.
Next is what would you recommend for a course of education to become an art appraisal or appraiser?
Well, the Appraisers Association of America has what's called a CASP program, which is learning about the different aspects of categories, and there are various. Well, NYU used to have the program. I don't believe they do. I think the Smithsonian has something, but you could contact the Appraisers Association of America, and they could give you some specifics based on where you're located.
Is there any recommended undergraduate or master's programs that you would think would help in your line of work?
Well, that's very interesting. I wish there was when I was going to college. So I would have been a shortcut. And it's so fascinating because it's not just appraising, it's the scientific testing that they can do today to determine fakes. And, there were certain pigment colors that weren't invented until certain years, where if somebody says that they have a painting that's early 19th century.
Of your amazing day and the exemplary career. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to, thank you so much. I'd like to turn it over to Karen Koprovich, who's the Executive Director and President of ESU USA. And thank you for everybody attending today.
Thank you, everyone.
Anyway, thank you so much, Deborah. That was really fascinating. I think I learned so much. I mean, the questions that you always ask yourself that you never sort of have the answer to. And it must be such an exciting career. And it was wonderful seeing your journey getting there and how you connected all the dots and made it work. That's always an inspiration. Thank you again. And I want to thank Brian Burns and the Sand Hills branch, and also the entire Happy Hour committee who puts these wonderful programs together. On a totally different note, or maybe not on a totally different note, given the fact that we were talking about ivory, on February 19th is our next Happy Hour, and I think this might be the first time that we're dealing with environmental issues. We're going to be hearing from Patricia Sims, who was responsible for why I started World Elephant Day. And I think that's going to be a wonderful, interesting conversation about how you get very important things in the public's eye and how you promote them and how you make people aware of various issues. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming today. And as I've mentioned in the past, the ESU is a membership organization. And if you are not a member or it's time for you to renew your membership, please renew your membership. The other thing I did want to mention is this spring, we have two very important events coming up. The first one is our Founders Award event, which is going to be taking place this year in our Central Florida branch in Winter Park. It's on March the 15th, and we're going to be giving our Founders Award to our current chairman, Dr. Pieper, or Dr. Quinn Pieper, and I think we're all invited for an amazing weekend in Winter Park, hosted by our Central Florida branch. And then on April 28th, and this is a new date because we just confirmed this, we will have our Shakespeare weekend. And it's this year, it's April 28th. And as in the past, we always have our wonderful weekend where you're invited to attend, come to the New York headquarters, experience the students, see the amazing talent that we have at hand, and then be at Lincoln Center on Monday, experiencing the performances and cheering on the winners. Thank you again and have a wonderful evening. And I hope to see you back here on February 19th.
Thank you.